1. And it's subtitled A Song for Those Journeying to Worship. A Pilgrim's Song. I look up at the vast size of the mountains. From where will my help come in times of trouble? The eternal creator of heaven and earth and these very mountains will send the help I need. He holds you firmly in place. He will not let you fall. He who keeps you never takes his eyes off of you, and he never drifts off to sleep. What a relief! The one who watches over all seekers of truth never leaves for rest or sleep. The Eternal keeps you safe, so close to him that his shadow is like a cooling shade to you. Neither bright light of sun nor dim light of moon will harm you in any way. The Eternal will keep you safe from all of life's evils, from your first breath to the last breath you breathe, from this day and forevermore. I couldn't help but enjoy our good friends down at Kent Memorial Lutheran. They had a sign last week inspired by this psalm and said, "Give all your troubles to God. He'll be up all night anyway." So another way to think, He who never slumbers nor sleeps. Well, today, in preparing a lesson, a final lesson for me to give you, I thought, well, here we are on the second Sunday of Lent. We're beginning that pilgrim's journey. Oh, we don't have to travel physically. We can travel, as Charles Fillmore said, in mind movements, from thought to thought. And we can consciously choose. Will my movement be from thought to thought that is in a destructive, discouraging, pessimistic way? Or do I choose, with Spirit's guidance, to be lifted thought by thought in the direction of my good, good for others, good for this world? This is very important work. I'm sure that this has been said throughout history, but I'm going to say it again. We are living in challenging times. There are sermons, or published now as articles, by Charles Fillmore speaking to the congregation in Kansas City, talking in his day, in the time of the Great Depression, in the uproar and change of the 1920s, especially during World War I, when unity was growing by leaps and bounds. And he'd say, we're living in challenging times. There's work to do. And that work, of course, in our unity tradition always begins, and hear that word, begins in prayer, or spending time in the silence. But it doesn't end there. It begins there. And then when we find our centeredness in peace, and we have guidance from above, from within, from the good Spirit of truth, the Christ that walks the way with us day by day, then we're prepared. We are empowered, as we say in contemporary language, to now take up action in the world. I ran across, well, I say accidentally, but I find books that I need when I'm contemplating a lesson tend to jump off the shelf at me, or find me in various ways. I go looking for one thing and I find another thing that's actually what I really needed. So I ran across this thought, speaking to this idea of beginning with prayer that shows us the all possibility of God, the perfect potential within us, or what Charles and Myrtle Fillmore called the pure potentialities of being. They liked the more elaborate Victorian words. But we begin acknowledging that truth, and then we carry it out in action, or what the Fillmores called demonstrate the truth you know. Put it to work. Well, I ran across a short little quote from Unity's first publication. We date our founding from April 1889 because that's when the Fillmores published the first issue of Modern Thought. In a couple of years, it would become retitled Unity Magazine, as it still is to this day. But in the beginning, that first issue, Modern Thought. And it carried a quote or motto or guiding thought. Action goes farther than speculation. It changes possibilities or simple probabilities into realities. Again, action goes farther than speculation. It changes possibilities or simple probabilities into realities. And so we have this twin teaching, as it were, in unity, of building a consciousness of God, a consciousness of truth, building minds and hearts that behold the highest truth that we can grasp. But then we have the action part, the demonstration part. As Myrtle Fillmore would often say, use the truth you know. And of course she was inspired by the biblical phrase, you shall know the truth, and the very truth you know will set you free. Now you might not necessarily hear it, but that setting you free is the action, the demonstration. One of, well, more than one of our Unity ministers has often used the phrase, I don't know who originated it. If anybody knows, please tell me. But a well-known phrase, the truth works if you work it. The truth works if you work it, if you demonstrate it. Charles Fillmore, well, that was a neat sound. That was something happening. Charles Fillmore would often remind people to be active. He said, you want prosperity in your life? Then do the things that make for prosperity. You want peaceful relationships in your work and your family and your community? Then do the things that make for peace. Now you have to sit down and do your homework. But you are all very sharp and intelligent and inspired by God, and I know you can do it. To make a community of peace, then we must hold one another in high regard. We must see the truth. Or in our unity speak, we must see the Christ abiding within the individual. We can stop and think, well, if I really blow off and let out my steam, really tell Jill off good, wait a minute, that's not going to make for peaceful relationships. Nor is silent criticism of one another. If we truly want the peace, the cooperation, then we have to be willing to do the things that build that. Just as we do in this service each week with our opening affirmations. That's to build the foundation for this entire service. If you say them with feeling, they will do you more good than anything I or any other minister up here can say. If you grasp that truth, that there is one presence and power in your life. Now that is not to acknowledge difficulties in the world, but it is to say, I consciously choose to begin, to set the stage, to hold the highest truth for myself, for others, for the world. That's a conscious choice. And then that second part, as Mr. Fillmore said, do the things that make or manifest or bring that truth into expression. And our heart can guide us on the way. I heard one Unity minister say, well, if a certain activity does not feel good, don't do it. Well, some people thought, well, isn't that nice? Life's all about just doing what makes us happy or what feel. No. Listen more carefully. If you're thinking of taking an action here, and you stop and listen to your heart, and you know that that doesn't feel good to lash out at another or to be destructive, if it doesn't feel good, don't do it. For my lesson, I thought, well, I've always found this to be an interesting little exercise. Usually I speak about it in the context of a class. But in Unity we have certain teachings. We have our fundamental 5 principles. And I found an interesting little trick. If I ask myself, what are the 5 basic principles of unity, for example, and I can't remember them, I can't quite, when I stumble over it and so forth, then I realize I have not fully internalized them, grasped them. Now, I know there are exceptions for all of us, but basically you have internalized your given name, and you can recall your name when asked. Except some of us who change our names from time to time, and then that just confuses everybody. But basically, what you have internalized in thought and heart, in your soul, you can recall easily. If I were to ask Karen about certain health principles, she wouldn't have to go look up in a book. She would know them because she lives them and she helps guide people with them. So something that you might try this week, this time of Lent, this journey or time of discovery, is to just ask yourself, I've been in Unity a year, I've been in Unity 20 years, I've been in Unity all my life, whatever your case may be, I'm new to Unity. Ask yourself, what teaching or idea has been most helpful, most significant to me? And see what you recall. Many students who studied, I believe Reverend Martha Judici coined the term, thoughts held in mind produce after their kind. For some people, that phrase is not just fun to repeat because it rhymes, but it's been helpful in their life to know that the thoughts they are holding, positive, negative, constructive, destructive, they produce in one's life. And for some people, that one thought has been it for them, and they've stayed with Unity for years because they find this thought powerful and creative and helpful. So I was thinking myself this morning, what has been helpful to me? Well, I could give you all kinds of quotations, but I go back to that little technique. What do I easily remember and recall? What's always on the tip of my tongue? Something that I've internalized. I learned this in ministerial school. One of our instructors was Reverend Tom Thorpe. He's been here to speak in this church. And he told me one time he didn't really know where this phrase came from, how it developed. It just suddenly was there. And since my ordination in 2002, this has always been a guiding light for me. And so I thought, well, that's something good to bring up in this, my final talk here. Reverend Thorpe said, a way to live life is to show up, to pay attention, to respond in love. To show up, pay attention, respond in love. To show up is, yes, we can physically show up, but it's really a little bit deeper than just showing up like this morning at church, sitting here. Showing up is a contemplation or a focus for your thoughts. Showing up means, well, as our military says, be all you can be. Be fully present. Now, on this morning when some of us didn't get enough sleep, we might have these little times when we're really not quite all here because we're physically tired. So showing up means being present. The second step, pay attention. Pay attention. Well, on the surface, that sounds easy. I need to pay attention to Larry Hall today. But paying attention is really not just staring or scrutinizing, but it's really being present to that individual, to other individuals. Paying attention is extremely powerful. I have discovered in ministry over the years that one of the most powerful things that blesses people is simply to be seen or to be heard, to be acknowledged. That may seem so simple, but in our busy world, and you can try this again, another homework assignment for the week, just try to kind of self-monitor yourself when the thought comes to mind. Am I paying attention? Have you ever had a time of driving when you're listening to music or you're thinking about you need to get your taxes done or something, and all of a sudden you've realized you've gone about a mile down the road and you didn't know how you got there? Your mind was elsewhere than on your driving. And that's not such a good idea. But it happens, that drift of our awareness away from the present to something else. So this paying attention, not only to what you're doing, but to one another. Third step, to respond in love. To respond in love. Well, that sounds warm and fuzzy. Oh yeah, sure. I try to give everybody a hug. Everybody I see at church or sometimes at work. Hugs all the time. Well, that's just one expression. To respond in love is to, as Charles Fillmore said, recognize the spiritual principle of love which unites. He gave kind of interesting characterization. He said the love of earth for human beings is expressed as gravity. Gravity keeps us from flying off the surface of the planet into outer space. It's the earth's love for humans, for animals, all of those that walk on the surface. Gravity, love holds us to Mother Earth. So contemplate how you respond in love. When someone asks something of you, how do you respond? Do you give them your full attention? Do you assist them, help them as you can? Jesus gave those challenging statements when someone asks you for your coat. Give them your cloak also. Well, that doesn't mean you're going to take off all the clothes you have and give them. That might cause a little disturbance. But it does mean going a little extra beyond their request. People that are successful in retail businesses always know how powerful it is to go just a little extra for the customer. Just a little extra token or gift to them. That customer will remember. They'll feel a bond with your business, and they will continue. They will be a loyal customer or client. Jesus, when questioned by an attorney at his time, someone who's going to really try to focus in on him, said, "Ah, Master, what is the greatest commandment?" Well, can you imagine? It's like we think we have several principles to remember in unity. Imagine Jesus. He had the entire history of the Hebrew people and the prophets and all the wisdom literature and everything. And here someone was saying, what is the greatest commandment? Jesus said to love your God with all your mind, with all your heart, with all your soul. We can say with all you got. And a second part, to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, I grew up always thinking, love your neighbor as yourself. That means, well, you're not supposed to think more of yourself than your neighbor. Kind of keep it equal and all of that. Well, it wasn't until I got a little later in life, a little further along the journey, that I thought, that might have a deeper meaning. And for me it was to love your neighbor as yourself, was to recognize that love connection. That this neighbor is not just this separate, distinct entity. This person is a part of your life. Even someone you casually meet down at Woods. You encountered them for a reason. They're part of your life. You are a part of my life. If you had not shown up this morning, where would my words have gone? You became a part of my life in that I could share my work as a Unity minister and you could receive it. You gave me someone to talk to. So this love your neighbor as yourself means recognizing that deep connection that we have. Our tradition as Unity gives us the key word for our meditation. Unity. What does that mean? As one of our songs says, it means we are one. We are connected. We aren't these isolated individuals. But we do have a little bit of a challenge. And that is, in our unity tradition, many people come to unity as a seeker of a truth. Perhaps they're looking for healing in their life, greater prosperity, a greater sense of peace. They come with an individual request, but then hopefully in the process, they will learn about community. And that we are pilgrims together on this journey. Dr. Rudolf Steiner made the statement that human beings awaken in the presence of others. Now, I don't know about you, but I had an image of awakening sitting all by myself on a mountaintop in that challenging lotus position, talking with God. That was awakening. Well, Dr. Steiner and others have pointed out that true awakening for the human being comes in the context of community. And so, as we walk this next several weeks toward Easter in this time of Lent, that's so often described as a journey, it's described that way so that we get this essential idea. We do not live this life alone. Everything that we accomplish, whether it's in our work environment, our family, our church environment, everything true, good, worthy, prosperous, is not done by an individual. It's done by the community. There's an interesting parable. I'm sure many of you have heard it, but I find the image very powerful. One day a man asked God, this is thought to be perhaps a Hindu story, but it's really appeared in many cultures. One day a man asked God, God, I would like to know what heaven and hell are like. God showed the man 2 doors. Sounds like Price is Right. Inside the first one, in the middle of the room, was a large round table with a large pot of stew. It smelled delicious. It made the man's mouth water. But the people sitting around the table were thin, sickly, pale. They appeared to be starving. They were holding spoons with very long handles, longer than their own arm. And each one found it possible to reach to the pot of stew and take a spoonful, but because of these long-handled spoons, they couldn't get the spoon back into their mouth. So they were starving in front of a great source of food. The man shuddered at the sight of their misery and suffering. God said, "You have seen hell." Behind the second door, the room appeared exactly the same. There was a large round table with a large pot of wonderful stew that made the man's mouth water. The people had the same long-handled spoons, but they were all nourished and plump and laughing and talking. The man said, "I don't understand." God said, "It is simple. Love only requires one skill. These people learned early on to share. And with those long-handled spoons, to feed one another." God continued, "The greedy only think of themselves, and they inwardly starve. Sometimes when we think only of our own needs and gratification, we tend to forget the interdependence, the connection, the responding in love that is community. We can go to the extreme of even stopping caring about others at all. But the parable makes it clear that we need the help of others. We need the help of others. And we make a difference to them. I want us to spend a time in silent meditation to hopefully awaken our sense of connectedness. So I invite you to become comfortable, to close your eyes, and we're going to use the power of imagination, that ability to create images inwardly of which our daily word speaks today. So gently turn your attention within and realize that it is a reality that you walk through this life in community with others. The only thing that differs is whether you keep that reality ever present in your mind or you tend to forget it from time to time. In our spiritual tradition, we are linked with the guides that have gone before us, long before us. But as we recall their journey, their discoveries, their overcoming of challenges, we sense a great connection. For we too know these truths, these powers, even the challenges and tests that are a part of the human experience. And although the great spiritual leader Abraham lived thousands of years ago, as we know his story of leading out in faith, guided by his God, we too are seekers, looking for a higher, greater reality. We recall the great Moses, the bringer of the law to his people. We too have journeyed with Moses because we have sought for order, for principle in our life and our world. We have journeyed with David, first the young adolescent that fought the tremendous power of Goliath, but through his great faith in his source, his God, he met the challenge of Goliath. He met many challenges, ultimately becoming the great king of his people. We too, in our way, have faced challenge, struggle in our lives. like David, we have had to face the difficulties, the tests of our life. We recall our way shower, Jesus Christ, who responded in love always to those that he met. Ultimately giving his life that Christ may be raised and that we may know that life always triumphs over death. Through the centuries, we can find the heroes, famous and not famous at all. And we've journeyed with them. We are one with them. For we have faced similar challenges, similar struggles. So I invite each one of you at this time, call to mind someone from past history, or perhaps someone very close to you in life, whom you admire, you revere, you look up to, you praise. Call their image into your mind. Allow your reverence to well up in your heart. And as you are filled inwardly with their presence, as you're filled with admiration, now pause and realize for yourself that what you recognize in this individual, what you admire and praise, must be a quality within your own soul. You must be connected with them, or you would not admire them. You are walking the journey with this individual, for you share the same sense for truth, for right action, for boldness, for courage, for compassion, that you see in this one that you admire so. Truly, you love them as yourself. In this experience, we have set a foundation for true community, connection. That is what holds a family together, co-workers, friends and neighbors. Yes, even a church. Is building a strong foundation for community, for connectedness. And the Holy Spirit can pour tremendous power into the community that we create. And we can close this time of meditation with a powerful affirmation that unity used in its years of great growth and expansion. Charles Fillmore would ask the workers and all who supported unity to hold this affirmation. In our unity of purpose, we are guided by infinite wisdom and prospered by divine love. In our unity of purpose, in our community, in our connectedness, we are guided by divine wisdom. We have the insight and the creativity that is required. And we are prospered by divine love. That spiritual power and substance that expresses in this world as abundance and good. So in our unity of purpose, as we build community, God can pour through us all that is necessary to fulfill our vision, our goal that we hold together. Father, Mother God, we give thanks that you neither slumber or sleep, but are always accessible. We give thanks for your perfect ideal, the Christ that walks this life with us. For this empowerment we rejoice. And we make the commitment to take this power into action, into our lives and our world. We give thanks that you have created us in such a wonderful way. Amen.